David, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the program today. I know you've got a lot to say, and we'll try and cover as much as we can in this short 10-minute span that we have. But for those who aren't familiar with you in the crowd today, we'd love to get a quick 30-second, if you can, introduction as to your background and what you do now.
Sure. So I'm originally trained as a neuroscientist, but I've been in industry now for 25 years. Most of that time has been spent building and running digital teams across industry. I have spent a lot of my time in larger organizations, pharma, medical device, and diagnostics, but also spent a fair amount of time with startups such as Livongo, and I have a small side consultancy that I've been running for the better part of a decade, that's focused on mostly on pro bono consulting with not-for-profit organizations that need assistance with digital. So.
No, that's wonderful. And yeah, I'm sure that a lot of the folks here would love to connect with you. David's details will be in the chat, so please do connect with him to definitely continue the conversation if we run out of time, which I'm sure we will. But we'll get right into it, David, and we'd love to dive right into the insights you have around the strategies right now and the correct strategies for integrating the different digital health solutions into the sort of pharma biotech product offerings right now, and the challenges that you're seeing in implementing those types of digital health technologies within, of course, what's right now a highly regulated industry, and how can that be overcome from your point of view?
Well, I'll start by saying you can't overcome it, nor should you technically want to overcome it. I'd say the key to deriving and building value by leveraging digital health technologies, especially in the context of, say, a large pharma organization, is in accepting that it's a beautiful constraint, and learning to not only work around it, but also find ways to use it to drive innovation within your organization. So I'll challenge the nature of the question off the bat. But when we talk about strategy, I think the real key with this for all of us is the most important element to strategy for how to leverage digital health within a large pharma organization is in staying laser focused on why you're there, what you're doing. You don't do it for its own sake. You are doing it precisely to help drive patient outcomes at scale through the best application of your therapeutics within that patient population. Anything else is a distraction, and the challenge with that is you oftentimes get caught between sort of two poles. On the one side, you'll have a part of the organization that fully understands that anything that's not focused on your core therapeutics is a distraction, but they also will mistakenly think that digital health is just one of those distractions. You've got another part of the organization that is there, oftentimes brought in to help solve for this, that is there pushing very hard for it, but it's very easy to get sucked into this notion that it exists and should exist for its own sake. Pharmaceutical companies are ultimately there to innovate new medications, new therapeutics, and to get them into as many of the right patients and to drive patient outcomes as possible. And so you have to stay laser focused on that, and strategy is ultimately about making those investment choices. So I'd start by couching it in those terms.
Yeah, I mean, you've had such extensive sort of experience, obviously, like I said, within pharma, biotech, and different organizations and so forth, and you've done a lot of work, obviously, in the digital space with these organizations. We'd love to hear about sort of like the most and more important ways in which today's pharma life science organizations are changing, and also what they need to do to change to become what we would, I suppose, we would term digital first in this day and age.
Sure. The challenge isn't the technology. The technology is there. The challenge is how the organization adapts itself to leverage that. There are some disciplines that we need to master in the industry. And the organizations that master these disciplines are the ones that are going to successfully continue to leverage this, not just proceed from expensive and flashy experiment to expensive and flashy experiment. The disciplines that they've got to master, and I mentioned, I think I kind of indicated initially, strategy is critical. There's also a really critical element around understanding partnership. I think this is something that we've struggled with in the industry for the past, for the past decade, at least when it comes to digital health. We haven't figured out what we want to build ourselves, what we want to buy, how we want to partner. And when we go to partnership, oftentimes we treat partnership like it's an extended version of vendor relationship, rather than having the ability to go to the table and craft new models for partnership. I would also say governance. It's a dirty word in pharma. Oftentimes, especially within commercial organizations who hear governance and think somebody else wants to put more handcuffs on me. But I would say that good governance doesn't do this. Good governance, well structured, actually frees you up by locating decision making and good visibility to what's going on in your organization in ways that make it easier to go faster in a lot of ways. So I'd say those are three critical organizational disciplines you've got to master. That and the experts. So I'm presuming some of the folks on this are digital experts, and so I'm not telling them anything you guys don't know. One of the most important things is not just formal and structural, it's also attitudinal. You cannot be successful in this transformation unless you have compassion for the different capacities for change across an organization. Unless you have that change compassion, unless you have the humility to understand that you're coming in to facilitate the core mission of the pharmaceutical organization, not turn the pharmaceutical organization into some future gleaming city of your imagination. You will succeed if you can embrace that humility. You will fail if you can't.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I like that. I like what you posed there around sort of the governance piece. That's so important. Not just on in the pharma industry, but I think I think just in general across the healthcare industry itself. And I think just to wrap up, David, we'd love to hear from you, especially the buyers and investors in this current audience as well, around the sort of next 5 to 10 years in terms of, you were talking about the technology isn't the problem because it is being developed and it is there. But, what have you seen, or what do you foresee in terms of, what the pharma and life science industry needs to leverage in terms of digital technologies and how it can reshape the healthcare delivery in the next sort of decade or so, and what technologies aren't on the radar right now, which I think a lot of people would love to would love to get some insights on.
I'd say some of the answer is honestly going to be quite obvious. It all tends to center, at least for pharma, around better and more effective use of data, how we acquire it, how we utilize it. And so, whether you're talking about on the R&D side, literally our investment in data on the R&D side is the highest value investments that we tend to truly make in terms of return. Every piece of data that we generate as a pharmaceutical company in the industry is is critical. It's more critical than it's more critical and more valuable even than the customer data on the marketing side. And so everything that we do around AI over the next few years is going to be critical. That means figuring out how we're going to approach that as individual organizations, and also, and I would say, I'm going to step outside of my pharma framework for just 1 second and say, at the end of the day, the value chain of data creation, and putting the ability to use that data directly in the hands of the healthcare providers is probably the most important thing we use these innovations for. We can Everybody and his brother can invent algorithms, but if the doctors aren't using these algorithms in care, then we're not seeing the lift in care outcomes, and that's the most important thing. So I would say over the next 5 to 10 years, what we are going to be looking at and going to be seeing, I think, is figuring out how we can utilize, how we build these algorithms, but more importantly, how we validate them and how we put these algorithms into the hands of physicians and the care provider network so that they can use them as a part of daily care. That's going to be the single most important area of innovation the next 5 to 10 years. As a matter of fact, I'll be honest, I've gotten to a stage where I kind of dislike the term digital health, and I tend to think more in terms of precision healthcare, because everything that we do ultimately is serving to try to drive that increased precision, I think. In terms of technologies that are not on the radar right now, I would not say 5 to 10 years, but somewhere out there, somebody is thinking about the pre-work that's got to be done for it to support newer models of computing. So I'd say we're still 30 years out. Applications of quantum computing in healthcare, but as we've learned with AI, if we had started thinking about actively building and using knowledge maps or other tools that make machine learning more effective, if we'd already spent more time and investment on getting our data sources integrated and building in some consistent standards across our industry, then we'd be much further ahead than we are. So what I would say is, let's go ahead and understand the problems that we know exist today and invest in those, because those problems are not going to get smaller. They're going to become much more outsized as we increase computing power and as we increase the ability to reach and embed these algorithms and these capabilities into the hands of care providers and patients.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the audience definitely do agree with you. There's a couple of emojis that went up and some comments is also in the chat, with complete agreement with what you were saying. David, thanks so much for coming on. I'm sorry we couldn't spend more time with you. We really appreciate your insights, and I think the audience definitely did as well. And of course, we invite everyone to connect with you, David, on LinkedIn. We did put David's LinkedIn in the chat, so do please connect with him afterwards. And David, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights with us.
Certainly, I appreciate your time. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely.